My name is Caroline Brooks. I'm the director at the Roswell Museum, where we have the privilege of honoring Goddard's legacy with exhibits of a recreation of his workshop, of his rocket components, a launch tower, a bronze statue by artist David Weitzman, and we have the Robert H. Goddard Planetarium, which is doing laser shows this weekend. Also, he and his wife, Esther, were avid supporters of the museum as it opened during their time here in Roswell in 1937. So I wish to share some background on Goddard and in recognition of today's honor. Robert Hutchins Goddard was born in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1882. As a teenager at the age of 17, he found his life's purpose in the pages of a Boston newspaper with the story War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. He wrote in his journal how wonderful it would be to make some device which had even the possibility of ascending to Mars. He began enthusiastically filling notebooks on his ideas for leaving the planet. In the 19-teens, while teaching and working on degrees in physics at Clark University and also in Worcester, he conducted meticulous calculations and experiments with gunpowder, which suggested the astonishing possibility that a properly constructed rocket was probably capable of space travel, something which many doubted because it was thought at the time that propulsion was impossible in the vacuum of space. This preliminary study led to an initial $5,000 grant with the Smithsonian Institution in 1917. In 1919, the Smithsonian published a seminal paper, A Method of Reaching Extreme Altitudes, which contained the basic mathematical theories behind rocket propulsion and rocket flight. The paper sparked some interest in physics circles. However, the popular press ridiculed Goddard because it was believed that it was impossible to reach the moon. As a result, Goddard himself never again shared the technical details of his work or any hint of the wonders that his vision brought within reach. Undaunted, though, Goddard began to conduct pioneering experiments with gasoline and oxygen fuels in his spare time. This bold new direction, which Goddard pursued alone for almost a decade, was arguably his greatest achievement. On March 16, 1926, Goddard launched his first successful liquid-propelled rocket on his Aunt Effie's farm in Auburn, Massachusetts. The rocket soared 41 feet in the air. As his experiments continued, they were growing larger, louder, and more destructive. It wasn't long before he was again ridiculed by the press for setting the New England countryside ablaze and frightening his Aunt Effie's neighbors. However, the negative press also drew the attention of famed aviator Charles Lindbergh, who was interested in rocket travel. Funding arranged by Lindbergh, largely through the Daniel and Florence Guggenheim Foundation, made it possible for Goddard to work on rocketry full-time and on a larger scale. That Massachusetts had never been an ideal location for rocket experiments, especially with sending tanks of flammable liquids aloft. So with this new funding, Goddard began looking for a better location, one with open space, temperate weather, clear skies, and a sparse population, which brought him to Roswell. In the summer of 1930, Goddard and his wife Esther, with a small crew of assistants, arrived in Roswell, and a workshop was built adjacent to their house on Mescalero Road. And with the permission of a local rancher, he built a launch tower in Eden Valley, a section of prairie about 10 miles north of Roswell. Goddard made significant progress during his 12 years here in Roswell. In addition to the rockets themselves, Goddard and his crew made developments in launch control, tracking, and recovery. In all, there were 56 test flights, 17 of which went above 1,000 feet in altitude. And on 2 occasions, the rockets worked perfectly and they landed safely back on the ground with the use of parachutes. U.S. rocket expert Wernher von Braun referred to his work as the most amazing lone wolf development program in the history of technology. Unfortunately, just as Goddard's work with liquid fuels was coming to fruition, his lifelong quest was over. In 1942, during World War II, a contract put Goddard in Annapolis, Maryland, where he was working on developing rockets to assist heavily laden aircraft for takeoff. He worked on the rocket assist device until his death on August 9th, 1945. He was laid to rest on August 14th, the day Japan surrendered. After the war, American rocketry grew into a large-scale enterprise. Unfortunately, owing partly to his reluctance to publish, Dr. Goddard was all but forgotten. It was only through the diligence of his widow, Esther, that many details of his pioneering work were finally brought to light. Artifacts were preserved, notes transcribed, and papers published. Goddard was eventually awarded 214 patents in rocketry and other fields, more than 3/4 of them due to Esther's work after his death. She also founded the Goddard Library at Clark College, established the Goddard Collection at the Roswell Museum, which received congressional recognition, by the way, and even petitioned the Postal Service to issue a stamp with his likeness on it. In 1960, the Armed Forces and NASA paid Esther Goddard $1 million for patent infringement and continued use of Goddard's ideas. This was the largest government patent settlement on record at the time. Though it required a lawsuit to prove the importance of Goddard's work, the awards and recognition that he finally deserved followed. Mrs. Goddard accepted a Congressional Gold Medal on his behalf in 1961, forever validating the important role he played in the history of rocket technology. So thank you.